Hello, and welcome to the Feeling Good podcast, where you can learn powerful techniques to change the way you feel. I am your host, Dr. Rhonda Borowski, and joining me here in the Murrieta studio is Dr. David Burns. Dr. Burns is a pioneer in the development of cognitive behavioral therapy and the creator of the new team therapy. He is the author of Feeling Good, which has sold over 5 million copies in the United States and has been translated into over 30 languages. His latest book, Feeling Great, contains powerful new techniques that make rapid recovery possible for many people struggling with depression and anxiety. Dr. Burns is currently an emeritus adjunct professor of clinical psychiatry at Stanford University School of Medicine.
Hello, Rhonda.
Hello, David, and welcome to all of the Feeling Good listeners. Today is episode 361 of the Feeling Good podcast, and we have two extra special guests, Angela Krumm and Zane Pierce of the Feeling Good Institute. And today we're going to be talking about how to cultivate delight using team tools. So hi, Angela and Zane.
Hi, Rhonda, David. Thank you so much for having us today.
We're excited to hear what you folks have to say. It'll be a little different direction, and I can't wait to hear the message.
Thank you, David. Pleased to be here.
So I thought I'd start off by reading a endorsement that we got regarding the podcast that you did, David, 357, Stories of the 60s, a talk that you gave to the Tuesday group. And someone immediately wrote to you, "Hi, David. Really enjoyed hearing about what life was really like in the 60s, and I was moved by your stories of letting your tears flow for the first time. I really felt for you when you described the story about those childhood bullies, and when you were finally able to release those tears in that group session. Personally, I've struggled with letting my tears out when experiencing losses that I've wanted to cry over. It was actually thanks to one of your stories in your books of when you cried over a patient that I really felt that crying can be manly and a powerful expression of one's love. Thank you for sharing your stories about what life was really like. You're such a compassionate person with so much room in your heart for the suffering of others. It floors me every time to hear that you started off wanting to counsel people for free from day one and your intense love of all those all over the world. I like to think you healed Miriam's drinking problem with the desert experience. Every day you're healing people you've never even met across the globe through your work, through books and the podcast. It seems like something you just do naturally. And thank you for helping me to cry again. Andrew.
Well, thank you, Andrew. That's a beautiful comment. I especially appreciate it because I was a little apprehensive about that episode, and some of the stories were a little on the far outside, even R-rated, and I thought I might get slammed by people, but it was a wonderful era to be alive in, the 60s, and I learned so much, and there was a lot of love then, and your comment was just filled my heart with joy and appreciation. So thank you so much.
So Angela, you sent out an email to the team certified group, talking about a podcast or a radio show about This American Life that you listened to, and it was about the show of delights, and then that sparked this idea that you have. I wonder if you could share that story with us.
Yeah, I'd love to share. It's all kind of a silly story. And David, hearing you say you had hesitations about a podcast you did, Zane and I are just hopeful there's something great in this for you all today. And we show up kind of humbly, wondering if this is all kind of silly and goofy or if it's wonderful. But we have had some hints from going through this process with people. And actually, I continue to get emails from now from members of the Team CBT certified community who feel kind of inspired by what I've been calling this journey to delight. And we've been just playing gently with this concept without too much seriousness. So how this got started is that I was listening to a podcast, as Rhonda said, called The Show of Delights on This American Life. And they were doing segments on different things that can be delightful. And there was an author who was interviewed briefly named Ross Gay, who's a poet and a scholar at Indiana University. And he has a book called The Book of Delights. And I had listened to, I'll tell you a bit more about Ross Gay's approach in a moment, but I had listened to this and was just thinking about the concept of joy and delight in my life. And then a day or two later, I was out for a hike with my family. And I just noticed I wasn't in a bad mood. If you'd given me a Burns mood survey, it wasn't that I was feeling really depressed or anxious, but finished the hike and had just this kind of neutral sense. And as I reflected on it, the neutrality of my mood was a bit disappointing. Like I had this sense of wishing, like I just did this beautiful hike with people I love. And I don't think I felt much excitement or delight or joy. It just felt like something I was just kind of going through the motions. And with that disappointment, I started thinking how I really do want to feel more joy and delight in my life, and not just be open to noticing delight when it occurs. Like sometimes we spontaneously see something amazing, or someone does something that's so funny and we just feel delighted. But I thought, how can I cultivate it? Like actually have an active role in feeling more delight. And then I started thinking, man, this is a little silly that as a cognitive therapist who's been doing cognitive therapy for 15 or 20 years now, I should know how to cultivate positive emotions. And I was reflecting on how even in our community of therapists, I think we spend so much time focusing on how to alleviate just suffering, right? We're helping people alleviate the depths of their suffering. Maybe we don't talk enough about just cultivating positive energy from what could be otherwise kind of neutral experiences like my hike, right? I wasn't suffering, so it wasn't occurring to me I needed to use cognitive skills, but I also wasn't delighting. And I started wondering, what if we more actively got involved in positive self-talk and practicing positive self-talk? Could we take things that might be more neutral and make them more delightful and experience more joy? And so this isn't rocket science, right? The premise of cognitive therapy is that we have control over our emotions by what we say to ourselves, right, David? That's fair to say that how we talk to ourselves impacts our mood. So why can't we use it to cultivate more joy? So let me tell you just a bit more about Ross Gay's approach, and then I'll pause so we can hear from you all what your thoughts are before I tell you about this little experiment that we started on what I was calling the journey to delight. So Ross Gay's probably most popular initial book is called The Book of Delights, and it's really cool what he did. He spent 1 year between one birthday to the next writing what he called essayettes, like meaning little essays every day, where he wrote about something he noticed that delighted him. And so they're very quick, easy reads. I found them really fun to peruse through. I didn't read it to cover because you don't have to find the joy. Examples, like one is about someone saying whoop-de-doo, like the silly phrase delighted him. He realized that was so fun and precious. Another example was seeing really like a weed with a flower that is just a weed growing out of like an ugly concrete curb, right? And how delightful that actually can be to see. He noticed an example at the time. He saw a mother and a child together, each carrying one handle on like a really heavy laundry sack walking down the street. And he delighted in this like shared labor for this task and the fact that they were like doing this together. Another of my favorites was a very short essay on, he's sitting on a flight and the flight attendant, when asking him his drink order, like triple tapped his forearm really gently. And it felt like this respectful intimacy thing of like us being humans and making touch in this way. So those are just examples of things that delighted Ross Gay in his book, right? What I thought though, because often when he talked about delight, he's talking about just noticing it, which I said earlier, right? Like here it is, he's noticing it as it is. And I'm thinking as a Team CBT community, let's think again about creating delight, because we do believe that we can impact our moods through our self-talk. So what if we take neutral moments and use self-talk to elevate delight? Is that making sense to you all so far? So yes. It's a bit different than what he did, which was more about noticing. I'm saying, let's cultivate it. Let's get more active. Instead of waiting for it to happen and noticing it, let's see if we can create it. So I'll pause there before I talk about this little experiment we set up and kind of the goofy, very non-scientific experiment we did. David, Aranda, what are your thoughts so far, just hearing this intro and kind of the inspiration that got us started?
Well, I'm excited to hear what you have to say. I've always been adamantly opposed to what you're saying because cheerleading is about the worst thing you can do with someone who's struggling or suffering. But then at the same time, I do a lot of statistical modeling, and I've had a chance to analyze a lot of data from the app, the Feeling Good app, and we measure both positive and negative emotions. And once again, I was reminded that they're not the opposite of each other. They're kind of going in often in different angles. Yeah. And it might be that although encouraging a very depressed person in positive self-talk might predictably make them feel worse and angry, because it would seem conceivably or definitely insensitive. That once a person's scores are like when you were on the hike, maybe you weren't depressed at that time, but not really feeling joy. And so maybe we could use these tools that once someone has more or less recovered from depression to accentuate the joy, the positive side. So I'm very open to hearing what you have to say. Absolutely.
Yeah, I love your point too, because you're right. Like for sure, cheerleading or like fake positive stuff we've all known doesn't work. And you've been so good at teaching us that, David, and helping us understand that is so upsetting to folks to have this like fake positive stuff put on, right? And so,
and I would also say that in the last couple of years, I've run into people who were into this. Expressing gratitude type of thing. And, I stopped short of vomiting, but only barely. It came across to me as kind of very formulaic and very fake, and really irritating. But at the same time, anything can be done in a skillful way or in a hostile or ineffective or formulaic way. So I'm all ready to hear the true violin, the sound of the skillful violin player.
Yeah. I might make you vomit a little, because I think there's no secret. David and I have known each other for years, and I am a little cheery and chipper at times. And probably I actually love gratitude journals for myself. So there'll be these ways in which it will rub you the wrong way for sure.
No, like I say, they can be a very beautiful thing. Anything can be done beautifully or in a kind of a stupid, naive, annoying way.
Right. I know. There's an art, isn't it, to figuring out what's going to be helpful for each person, for sure.
Right.
Yeah, absolutely. So I think actually this might be a good time. David, you're expressing some of that healthy skepticism, which we talked about. So I'd taken these ideas to my Thursday morning group, which is a training group I've led for years. And we were playing with these ideas. And one of the things that was raised was the importance of us just taking a moment actually to acknowledge, to do a bit of like, what am I trying to say? Like looking at all the advantages or disadvantages of focusing on delight at all, right? And I thought even just as a group, maybe the four of us could spend a minute. What I'd want us to think about is what would be good reasons not to try to cultivate delight. And listeners, I'd want you to participate as well in brainstorming. And so let me say the question again. We want to first make space for what are all the good reasons we should avoid cultivating delight? And I can think of a bunch offhand, but my guess is you all can think of a few as well. David's given us some that might fall into this bucket. Rhonda, can you think of any good reasons people might not be interested in cultivating delight in their lives?
Yeah, I mean, you said, if they haven't recovered really or if they're still in the throes of a deeper depression, and they can't see anything delightful in their life, it might make them feel even worse and even more depressed. Like I'm so unhappy, I'm so depressed, nothing will heal me. Nothing will work.
Sure.
And then why in that situation, Rhonda, might someone who's trying to get you to cultivate delight, why might that make you even more depressed and angry?
Because I'm incapable. I'm not meeting the expectations of my therapist. I'm not seeing, actually I'm a failure.
There's another reason. Those are good ones, but there's another huge reason, and I'll spit it out if you want, or Zane or Angela can Well, because you may be looking for some understanding and compassion to someone to go into the darkness with you.
Yes.
And be there with your suffering. And that's what we try to do in the empathy phase of team. And I'm sure in theory what most therapists would want to do and would try to do. And that's an extraordinarily important experience. And so
Right.
We also know that many and perhaps most therapists are conflict phobic and emotophobic and afraid of negative feelings. I can remember a therapist I supervised who has become probably one of the world's greatest therapists. But initially, he was very afraid of when patients cried because he didn't know what to do, and he tried to kind of change the topic. That he was freaked out by negative feelings, and so that would be, some ways of misusing what you're talking about.
Yeah, it could be like avoiding the truth, going into the depths of the truth of their depression or sad feelings, right?
Yeah.
Yeah. Zane, can you think of any good reasons not to cultivate delight? Did you want to add any?
Sure. Well, I'm myself am very subject to being distracted a lot. So I could imagine one reason I would want to do is I would be a distraction from things that's important for me to focus on.
Mm-hmm.
So
sure. Yeah, it takes time to look for. Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, it also, other ones our group came up with, just to throw out a couple, is that let's see, focusing on the negative, kind of the opposite of cultivating delight, gives us an opportunity to be compassionate for others as well, because we're stuck or seeing the reality of dark, difficult things, right? We're not fooling ourselves, or we could even, a benefit of not cultivating delight is it would keep us in reality. We don't want to be one of these fake, happy, cheesy people, right? That are walking around just seeing good things.
Actually, I've always secretly wanted to be one of those fake cheesy
Have
people.
You?
I thought it'd be fun.
Well, when we're on that same path, Angela, we have a lot of motivation often to work hard and to get better, to feel less depressed. And if we're focusing on, cultivating delight, maybe we'll lose some of our motivation to heal ourselves.
Yeah, absolutely. Right. Yeah. And even for folks who aren't depressed, right? A lot of what we're talking about today is assuming folks who are not in depths of depression, right? But even folks who are just walking around in the world having neutral experiences might not be excited about focusing on delight, because it might lower their standards for things being good enough, right? When I reflect on that hike and why I wasn't actually enjoying it much, is my brain's always really busy seeing what could be better. I should have brought this along, or, only if we'd started earlier, it wouldn't be so hot, right? And there's this kind of constant high standards thing that's keeping the next hike is going to be perfect, right? And then I'll feel delight. And I kind of like those high standards about myself. And if I'm just so busy seeing the delight in it, it might feel good enough that I wouldn't be pushing myself. So sometimes high standards are reflected in kind of our unwillingness to see the positive or use the positive self-talk.
Absolutely.
So a number of reasons not to do it, right? So given that, we still had a group in our Thursday group who said, well, I'm curious if we can cultivate more delight. I would like to see what happens if we approach this as just an experiment that we could try as a group. And so we set up, like I said, this very non-scientific, kind of loosey-goosey experiment that we started with our Thursday group, and then we opened up to the whole team certified community. And we had a lot of people who emailed me separately saying they did it, but they didn't do the full data tracking. But we had 42 people who did it according to the setup. And so I have a little N of 42 here that we worked with. And what we asked them to do is to take an experience, at least a 5-minute experience, could be longer, but kind of minimum of 5 minutes, and ask them to pick something that they see as somewhat neutral or mundane of a task for them. They don't have a lot of feelings associated with it. And then the variable we asked them to insert was inserting positive self-talk. So intentionally adding self-talk that focuses on good things. And so we asked them after they did it to list some examples of the positive self-talk they use. So I'll share some of those with you. And so before they started the experiment, we asked them to do the amazing, famous David Burns happiness scale, which is 5 items. And then I also just made up, again, in my very non-scientific way, a single item delight score, which was just asking them how much delight they felt. Because I wanted that word specifically included, since that was kind of the theme of the experiment. And we had them do that again after their experiment was done, right? So do the happiness scale plus the delight item, engage in the activity for at least 5 minutes and add positive self-talk, then do the post-test, the same measures. And then after that, we just had them reflect, give us some examples of positive self-talk they used and any reflections they wanted to share with us about their experience. Okay.
Quick question.
Yeah.
How did you norm your delight scale? Was that a 0 to 100 or a 0 to 10 or what?
Yeah, it was this tiny little range, which wasn't great for the data, but we just had it was just 1 to 5. Yeah. Using the same responses that you use on your happiness scale. We just borrowed that model. And so again, very unscientific, but a way to just capture a little bit of delight. So really, the happiness scale is a much more helpful data at this point because it's been normed and you did the research on it. The delight is just kind of a fun way to check that as well.
Were they the same response options? How much delight do you feel? Not at all,
Yes.
to tremendously. So it's just like adding a single item to the happiness scale. How much delight do you feel?
Exactly.
Yeah, that's great. Yeah. Very cool.
Just followed your model there. So before I tell you the big results, since Zane's here and participated from the beginning and in the group and thinking about this and doing it, I wanted Zane, if you could share what you did for at least one or both of, I think you did a couple of times, maybe tell us a little bit about your experience and what you noticed. And then again, I'll share kind of what the data told us and some more examples from other participants.
Sure. Yeah, I'll talk about that. May I preface this with some talk about why I decided to seek delight in the first place?
Right. Sure.
Yes.
No, I'd rather you don't.
Okay. Well, let me just cut straight to the chase.
I'm just pulling your leg. Yeah.
Dr. Burns. Yeah. So I'm dealing with a lot of grief in my life right now.
That's so sad.
I lost my brother to suicide about 2 months ago, and we had a really strong connection, a lot of closeness, and for a while, my world's been very upside down and sideways and going through the various stages of grief at any given moment, any time of day. So when Angela brought out this idea of us fostering positive emotions like delight, I was really interested in taking that journey with her, because I'm seeking delight almost as a preventative measure against depression that might set in. I don't know if it will, but I'm trying to add some positivity, because I'm finding my experience of grief is kind of like a pendulum. Sometimes I'm swinging into sadness and sorrow, and other times I'm swinging into joy and delight and other emotions, and that's okay with me. I don't think it takes anything away from the grieving experience. So I find I can kind of pick up grief and deal with that when I want to, and then put it down, and then focus on something delightful. So that's why this idea of seeking delight in my life was very intriguing to me. So I met up with Angela and a few other colleagues in Cuesta Park in Mountain View. And we kind of took a routine walk to the park. And in our first activity, we were walking together, and we spotted this swing set in the clearing. And I forget which of us, but one of us had the idea of all getting on the swing set and swinging together. And so we did. And that was a beautiful moment. I caught an instant rush. I think there's something about the act of swinging that's very kind of proprioceptive. It kind of gets into the vestibular parts of the body. So all at once I was feeling really calm, invigorated, but really delightful. And I think what really made the difference was doing this with colleagues who I like and I enjoy being with. And to enhance the moment, I was telling myself, this is a really special moment. This feels awesome. I get to swing with my colleagues. I would say it was shame attacking, but there wasn't a great deal of shame on which to wage any war, just because it felt so great. So that really added some layers of meaning to the experience, being able to do this together. So on the second round of Cultivating Delight, this was more of a solo endeavor. We took walks by ourselves. We were strolling around the grounds and I was taking note of my surroundings and walking slowly through a grove of redwood trees. And here we have these redwood trees. If you live in California, you know that they're hundreds of years old. But I see this one that looks like it's really distressed. It's got tons of like drooping branches and brown leaves, and I assumed it was dead. But on closer inspection, I was delighted to see that it seemed to be kind of fighting for its life. There were new kind of green shoots coming out, interspersed with all the dead debris. And so I told myself, "Wow, this is really awesome. Here we have this tree, and it's going through. I don't know what brought on such distress, if it was climate change or what, but it's still holding on. It's fighting for life." I won't get too metaphorical, but it made me think about myself. So that for me brought some moments of delight into my life. Just really simple, observing what I saw. I think I spotted a hummingbird a little later on. Those are the kind of things that delight me. So that's what made it a meaningful experience.
And Zane, what were the positive thoughts you told yourself after you had those experiences?
Or during?
During, yeah, that's the key.
Yeah. So during the walk by myself, I was just like telling myself, I'm going to look around, look for things that are interesting, look for things that are delightful. When I looked at the tree and I saw that the green shoots were coming out, I said, "Wow, this is really awesome. Like nature is incredible. The will to survive." Noticing things like that, I looked closer at a leaf and I noticed of another plant. I noticed there were some little holes in it, and I was like, "Wow, that's so cool!" Like this, I don't know what kind of plant this is, but it's attracting some bugs, and they're eating it, and then birds are going to come and eat the bugs, and it's going to attract all kinds of like life to this. As you can tell, I'm kind of on a nature kick. So those are some examples of what I was telling myself. I hope that illustrates it.
Yeah,
that's really really beautiful, and in a way, I think there's two ways that we can kind of wake up when we're asleep. I think people are asleep most of the time, or dead most of the time. And one way that you can wake up is to tune into the suffering of other people, that people are, hiding, and when you really are tuned into that, and you may begin to cry as well, and sense the loneliness and the sadness inside of people, and to me that's kind of like a mystical experience of the highest form, the most alive that I ever feel. But you can also wake up to the positive things that we're also see. We're just looking around, and like here's a napkin, and here's a pen I'm using to take notes, and there you folks are, and we're not really alive and noticing, and for me, one that helps me is, as you all know, it's like when I'm with one of our cats. We have just one now, but again, it was an abandoned cat, and we adopted her from the pound. Her owner had died. She was very timid, and now she's getting very bold and loved, and and she talks to us constantly, and just to be with her and pet her, and she rolls over on her back, we pet her tummy, and she just purrs so loud, and just little things like that have taught me so much about like when you give up these structures in your brain that keep you in suffering, like, oh, I'm not special enough. Well, cat tells me, hey dude, I'm not special either, but I'm sure lucky you folks adopted me, and I just love the hell out of you, and it's just kind of a little type, we all have our different ways, but I think that's what you're talking about, is how to wake up when you're dead.
Mm-hmm.
Exactly, because there's so many things we don't notice going on around us. Small things, the way people feel suffering around us.
Yeah. And then, as you say, the beautiful things, the amazing things.
Right.
And, when you get elderly like me, you say, hey, I better appreciate this. I don't have too many beautiful August days to notice.
Right. It's like tuning in, right? And using our self-talk to cultivate that joy. And we talked, David, about you and your cats as an example, just wonder what David's self-talk is when he's petting one of his precious babies and feeling so connected. My guess is it's full of things of appreciation and acknowledgement and just joy of the sensory experience.
I'm just telling her how beautiful and wonderful she is and how much we love her, and she just absorbs it. Sometimes though it doesn't work so well. She's she gets so excited, she starts getting real assertive, and then she won't let us take our hands away. And if we try to move our hands away, she claws at us. So we're trying to get her to stop doing that. But everything has its limits. But that I think the love of an animal is such an incredible thing, especially to some of us. Maybe some people are indifferent to it, but it kind of steals my heart away.
Yeah.
And then here we get to hang out with you guys today, and how awesome is that?
Thank you.
Zane, I'm kind of curious about the scores on David's happiness scale and Angela's delight, one item delight. Did they change from the beginning to the end of this experiment?
This is probably a good segue for Angela to talk about her results. I know she kept an aggregate of everyone who participated in this, of their happiness scores.
Yeah, I'd love to hear what the group is, but I would love to hear too what you specifically, because this is really your story first.
I don't think he has his numbers.
I don't think I have the numbers in front of me, but Angela might, and so she could. I can tell you they were more positive.
Yeah, I mean, you don't have to know the number. Just like, did you go up? Did it feel better?
Oh, absolutely.
It doesn't have to. You don't have to tell us what it.
No, but we need the numbers, and we need them now.
Okay, so my joy went up 75%.
I would have guessed 76.
Yeah, connection to others actually went up much higher as we swung together.
Tell us your numbers. Then I had a wild idea, but tell us your numbers, Angela, because I love numbers and research.
And then I have one more anecdote. Actually, it's another pet example from someone else that I think really shows like the exact use of this self-talk. But so then I was kind of shocked by the overall number. Zane's did go up as well, and I wish I had him in front of me. I'm sorry I didn't. But so the happiness scale, right? That's the Burns happiness scale. 5 items can range 0 to 20, and our average change from pre and post was 4.12 points, which was an average increase of 39% in happiness.
Cool.
By adding self-talk. There's a 39% increase in happiness. And now the delight item.
And that was 4 points on the scale?
Yeah. Mm-hmm.
From what to what?
Oh, I didn't pull that in front of me. We'll have to put all the details in the show notes for the people who want all the exact numbers, because I pulled just my short version here.
Yeah, cool.
So the 39% increase was what I was focused on there. And then the delight item was more dramatic. Granted, it was a smaller scale range here, but it was a 75% average increase in delight.
Oh, cool.
From having added the self-talk,
nice.
Which I didn't know. I thought, well, at least it will be, I had very low expectations I thought generally at least people will probably feel the same or maybe a little bit better, but I did not expect that dramatic of a change. And we could argue maybe there was a lot of confirmation bias. Maybe people wanted to please me as a researcher. Again, this was not a well-orchestrated scientific experiment, but it was fun to see that at least the people who participated, both anecdotally and via the numbers, showed like a big jump in both their happiness and their reaction to this delight item.
I was just thinking that with our app, we just today created a new 7-point happiness scale, because we have a 7 negative feelings sliders that's highly reliable. like it has a 96 or to 98% reliability. But it's all negative emotions, and we're showing dramatic reductions in negative emotions. But today we just created a positive feeling scale with 8 items on it, actually measured from 0 to 100. And maybe we could, persuade you to help us create a little class or a lesson or something on, once you get your score down to 0, here are some things you might want to do to boost the happiness scores.
Yeah, it'd be so fun, right?
And then we could be measuring it, and we'd actually have all of the data to do causal modeling and so forth.
Yeah, take this from a little silly fun thing to something more scientific and real. That'd be awesome.
Yeah, people might love that. I'll mention that to Jeremy, who's working with me on the app, and see what he thinks. I think our app team would be real excited about doing something like that.
Good. Can I tell you one more fun story? And then I want to engage y'all in thinking about how we can use this with people in different ways as well. So the other fun example I wanted to give you was with a participant named Michelle, who chose vacuuming dog hair as her neutral activity. So this was one that she says is something she has to do all the time, and she doesn't generally feel many positive emotions with it, not necessarily depressed doing it, just feels like a chore, right? And so she gave us, these are examples of her positive self-talk that she added while she vacuumed the dog hair for 5 minutes. I just think these are hilarious. They make me giggle every time I read them. So she says, I'm contributing to canine diversity by putting up with dogs who shed. If there weren't people like me, the world would be only poodles and doodles who don't shed. Then she says to herself, it's true that the work never gets done. Just when you think you vacuumed up all the fur, they shed again. But even a little vacuuming is still an improvement. And then she says, it's so fascinating to see how the fur gets sucked into the vacuum and finds places to settle, just like in my house when it settles under the couch into all the nooks and crannies. And so this is her example of self-talk. I think she rocked it. Those are great examples of positive things to say to herself while doing this otherwise mundane task. Her increase in happiness went up 62%, and her delight went up 33% from before she did the self-talk. So I thought Michelle's example is just such a fun example of how we insert this positive self-talk and make this task one that actually has much more enjoyment, right? Before.
That's cool. When I was
makes me kind of want to go vacuum, doesn't it? Like the animal hair.
Absolutely. Like Tom Sawyer painting the fence. Before I went to college, I was lucky to get a job working in a bank to raise a little money to have for college over the summer months. But my job was pretty tedious because I was, a teenager, and they couldn't trust me with anything important. But I got to file checks all day, alphabetically by hand, and so the way I did it was to see who had the weirdest name on the checks, and the weirdest name I ever came across, and this was in Phoenix, so I probably had a limited ethnic range of contacts in those days, but was Karakan Moomjayan.
That's a mouthful.
Amazing you can remember that.
Yeah, well, I'll never forget that name, Karakan Moomjayan. But it was kind of fun, what names will I come up with today?
Yeah. But it probably kept you engaged and excited. Right?
Sounds like a moment of delight.
Yes, it is a delightful name. That's great. So we wondered, is it, I had a lot of people asking us questions about, like, are we supposed to assign this to clients? Is this just for us as therapists? And I just wanted to talk that out with all of us together today, because I surely don't have all the answers to these things. I think that really we set up this experiment just really for our therapist community to say, could we go on this journey to cultivating delights and feel better? There was one therapist in the community who emailed me saying she had started actually assigning this to a client. And I said, okay, I don't know what to think about that yet. And I love what David's saying today of really thinking about this idea of encouraging clients to use their self-talk skills to kind of heighten delight when they're not in the lows of depression, when it's not an example where we're asking them to ignore the depressed feelings, or, in those cases, we want them to use the mood log to really talk back to the negative thoughts directly and to be using that skill set. But we wondered as a group if there is overlay already on team skills, and we thought of a few where maybe we could kind of play with these concepts together, and just wanted to check those out with you and with Rhonda and David and Zane and us here together. Like one that came up in my group was when we do examine the evidence with clients. Is there ways that we can see overlap on using positive self-talk as we think about skills like examine the evidence? Do you see any application there, Rhonda or David, or are we stretching too far there?
I don't know what you have in mind, but I know Rhonda has a brilliant thought, so I'll leave it to her.
So you're talking about examining the evidence to believe I just want to make sure I understand what you're talking about. To believe the evidence that you're coming up with?
Yeah, I'm not really sure what I'm talking about exactly. I might be a bit off base even in raising it, but we just feel like, let me step back. Generally, we surely see that, using our self-talk is inherent in all of the team skills. And we were starting to brainstorm as a group. For example, when we're doing and examine the evidence. So remember, folks who might be new to that skill, we'd for example, might put a thought at the top of a sheet of paper, and then have evidence supporting that thought on one side and evidence contrary to that thought on the other, as a way for a client to decide if the thought is really true. Right. And so we wondered, for example, let's say that we have a client who thinks that like everything sucks, everything's bad in the world, my life is all bad, right? Could we, people in the group are wondering, could we assign like trying to cultivate delight as a way to see if they have moments of joy? It's like maybe it's a stretch too big, but we were just trying to play with how do we take the wonderful world of the Team CBT methods we have, and is there any application to put these things on them?
Well, I've told the story about one of my earliest cognitive therapy patients was this young lady who had very severe borderline personality disorder, and she was a self-mutilator, and she'd been involuntarily hospitalized for years when she was first referred to me. And one of her negative thoughts, she was, angry at herself and wanting to kill herself, but angry at the world too. So she didn't have a double standard. She just had one standard of hostility in all directions.
Yeah.
And one of her thoughts, she said that the kids in the dormitory were, she was decided to take a try at college. They were saying, "Oh, where is Sarah?" with some other young lady in her freshman class, and then the boys said, "Oh, if you're looking for her, you can probably find her sitting on the edge of her window in her dormitory room," meaning she's probably threatening to commit suicide. And it was a very mean-spirited, sarcastic thing to say. And then my patient's thought was that's what I'm talking about. The world is filled with people who are cruel and insensitive. And that's my proof. And then I presented it in Beck's seminar, and he said, "Well, why don't you tell her to examine the evidence and ask her to think back on how many people have been cruel or insensitive to her in the past month?" And then she couldn't think of a single one, and that we made a little bit of a dent in her intense negativity. And I actually got an email. I was thinking about this just earlier today, because I get all these emails now because of the podcast, and I got some email from some woman who she writes that just nothing but horrible things happened to her, like all day, and it's forever been that way. And I was just not trying to convince her of anything different, just be warm and supportive, which is usually the best strategy. But then I thought maybe she could do a kind of an experiment too, and maybe see what are people treating her, decently or in a friendly way, or like some examine the evidence. I think that would have some potential there, and you can probably illuminate us on this thing, Angela.
Yeah, I don't know. I love examine the evidence in general, and
Do you?
I think it's a great technique. Yeah, I think it
Wow.
really helps people to um, see what's real and to avoid the distortions that make us only look at one side of the coin.
Yeah.
Yeah, and I don't know. In this case, I guess we could almost think of it as an add-on of an experimental technique where someone's going to experiment with adding positive self-talk to neutral things to find out if there could be more pleasure in their life, if they could cultivate delight, therefore be working against a belief system that is any belief system that kind of says there's a total absence of delight in an all or nothing way. It would be different than examine the evidence. But yeah, we're just as a group thinking, how does this fit? How does it add on? I think maybe one of the biggest. Oh,
yeah, I can think of a lot of other methods that this could be incorporated in. It could be incorporated in the semantic technique really easily. I think even, time projection. When we think about teaching people how to do flirting practice or smiling, say hello, the technique of image substitution, I think all of those could incorporate ideas of delight and positivity.
Mm-hmm.
And and that's just about 5 minutes of thinking about methods.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, you're so good at brainstorming the possibilities. We probably have listeners who are like, "Oh, I'd want to hear about each of those," and we wouldn't probably have time to get into all those, which is okay too.
But what do you think of the semantic method, Angela?
Yeah, so semantic, let's talk that out. I want to hear how you're seeing the application. So semantics about the words we use impacting our feelings. What are you thinking we'd be guiding them with, like picking words that focus more on delight, or how are you thinking about it?
Yeah, picking words that, exactly what you just said, focus on delight and leading into the direction of delight instead of despair.
Yeah, seems like possible implications for sure.
You guys are focusing on how to get people to have more fun in life and more delight in life in kind of an abstract way. It just occurred to me that that's something I've sometimes done with patients, but I always find the agenda setting to be so critical. And I remember a patient who came for an intensive in Philadelphia when I had my clinic. And she wanted to have more fun in life. That was her agenda. It was different from most people, but she was very straight-laced from a very kind of a rigid religious background, and she was, she was just very attractive and very very perky, but super serious. And she said her agenda for the session is, I want to have more fun in life. And so I said, well, I'll be glad to show you how to do that. What time of day would you like to have more fun? Like, let's be specific. And she said, well, how about tonight at 6:30? And I said, okay, great. What are you going to be doing at 6:30? She said, I'll be taking the train from Philadelphia to New York. And I said, well, what would be your idea of having fun on the train to New York? And she said, well, maybe there'd be some real cute guys there, and I'd be flirting with them, and that would seem really awesome. And I said, okay, well, I can give you an assignment to do that, but do you have any fears about it? What's holding you back? And say, well, someone might see me flirting with cute guys and then think that I'm a slut. And, and then I said, well, suppose somebody, some serious woman said, I saw you flirting with that guy and I think you're a slut. What would you say back? And she said, I don't know. What could I say? You could say, well, thank you. I've been taking slut training from Dr. Burns. And she thought that was wonderful. So I gave her the assignment to flirt with 5 guys on the train to New York. And you have to be thoughtful but I knew that she'd get great results because she was as cute as can be and she had a beautiful personality. And she just had, I guess, one of the most euphoric experiences of her life on that train to New York. But
Right.
I think that's an angle too of the kind of finding joy and celebration in life and delight in life is getting people to be specific about
Right.
what's the situation where you'd like to be having more delight, and then there's usually something kind of shyness or whatever holding people back.
Yeah, and have to work on those beliefs that hold them back.
Yeah, and then that story also led to the acceptance paradox, where she was able to accept, I've been taking slut lessons. Like, there's nothing the matter with that. And turning it into something really fun. And
exactly.
Yeah.
Exactly.
I love it. Yeah. I thought, it feels like probably the biggest take home when I pose the question of let's think about Team CBT, more applications is really bringing back to what David said towards the beginning, that we do want to be really careful of not pushing this idea flippantly on people. We want to work with specificity of a specific problem, and we want to honor all the good reasons in their suffering first, and really see this as something for certain people who want to elevate delight, remembering just like when we think about, our learning cognitive skills gives us the power to dial down our negative emotions, to dial up positive emotions. And it's just one more way to think about how they can use those skills. I do want to check in with Zane before we wrap up. He's willing to share a few words about how it's impacted his life. And I also just wanted to do an invitation to listeners, if it's okay, to maybe just take even 20 or 30 seconds right now to whatever you're doing. If you're driving while you're listening to the podcast, or if you're sitting at home or on a walk, and see if for just a moment you can just be present with what's around you. Notice things, but add positive self-talk. If you can even do that, just that. We won't worry too much about the outcome. Does it change how you feel? But can you come up with some positive self-talk to supplement whatever you're doing in this moment? Would it be okay if we just awkwardly pause for just a moment to invite them to do that?
Sure. No, not at all. This sounds outrageous.
Too awkward. Angela, it's so weird.
Yes, it sounds cool, Angela.
Great.
So should we do that now?
Yes. So right now, I want to invite people, we'll just be quiet for a moment, and your job, listeners, is to add some positive self-talk to the moment you're in. What can you say? You're in control of your thoughts. What can you say that adds positive? Maybe you can add another statement, maybe one more. And if you're able to add positive talk, then you might notice, how is that impacting your mood? Do you feel any change? And if not, that's okay. But if so, is this something you want to play with, of the add-on of positive self-talk, using those skills to increase happiness and joy? And you can keep playing with that if you like the concept. And if you hate it, you can toss it out, and that's okay too. So Rhonda, should we check in with Zane about his reflections, or whether?
Yes, I'd love to. Yeah, absolutely. Let's check in with Zane.
Yeah. So a moment ago, we were talking about how this searching for delight, cultivating delight, might map onto team CBT methods or CBT methods. But I had the thought that I think this does map onto the axiom about emotional change, or the conditions that are necessary and sufficient for emotional change. Meaning that I think in order for this to really be effective, at least for myself, that positive moment enhancing thought has to be pretty close to 100% in order for it to really make an impact in how I'm feeling. So I wanted to point that out.
It has to be 100% true, right?
It has to be 100% true, yes.
Yeah,
you have to really buy into what you're saying about that moment.
So if I say I'm about to win the Irish sweepstakes, I won't believe that, so it won't make me feel happy.
Yeah.
Right.
It's true of all of our positive self-talk, whether it's responding to a negative thought or just being added on, that if we don't believe it, it's not going to be helpful. Yeah, thank you, Zane.
Yeah, so to speak to the after effects of the experiment, I'm finding that sort of introducing myself to this idea and starting to, practicing in the park with you, Angela, and a few others has led to me adding it to my life as a positive habit. I don't know if I'm at the place of positive addiction yet, but I'm incorporating it a little bit each day, at least trying to. There's certain things that I'm finding delight in. For example, I have two small children. And so I might be, tickling my 2-year-old daughter, and she smiles and says more. And then I have this thought like, oh, she's so cute, she's so adorable, I just love being around her. And it adds the delight in that moment. Or take something like eating and drinking. The other day I bit into a pink pearl apple, which has red flesh, and just being like, oh my God, like this is incredible. It's so crisp. It's these flavors. It tastes like lemon parfait. It's delicious. Really brings that up. Really noticing and also putting a label to what I'm doing, or what I'm enjoying, or even something as mundane as on the bicycle, schlepping the kids to daycare, telling myself, wow, this breeze on my skin feels so nice. The sunshine feels so wonderful on my face. That kind of thing. So really, this is added, I think, a lot of positivity to my life. Like I said, I can kind of grieve when I want to grieve and delight when I want to delight. And feels like it's giving me a lot of more effective control over how I'm processing what's going on.
Do you think it's giving you more balance?
I would say so, yes.
Thank you, Zane. Thank you for sharing that. That was, your personal experience brings it home and to more of a reality of what you're talking about. My husband and I have an inflatable kayak, and we've only used it 3 times.
I thought you were going to say an inflatable doll.
Yeah, I was thinking the same thing. But
no, gosh, how would you think
delightful?
That? No.
There's lots of sources of delight in the world.
Yeah. And we've only used it 3 times. And the first time we could not figure out how to inflate it. We didn't get any instructions from the store, and it was very frustrating. And the second time we figured out, but it took 2 hours. And the third time we tried, which was just this Sunday, it only took 30 minutes. And we both took a moment to just feel really delightful that we got the kayak inflated, and it only took 30 minutes, and there were no arguing, no snapping at each other. And it's just those moments it's just like what you said, Zane, when you're tickling your daughter and she says more, and you can stop and say, this is a really incredible, delightful moment. And I think we can find those throughout our life without it being, phony.
Yeah, that's right.
Yeah.
Right. Like just taking a moment to congratulate yourself on having, assembled this canoe in 30 minutes.
Yeah.
I think sometimes we don't allow ourselves to feel proud of our accomplishments. We diminish them, but to allow yourself to.
Yeah. When you lower your standards real low, then you can find delight in all kinds of things.
Right.
And it's just so, it sounds corny to say it, but we have so much to be grateful for, and we often just take everything for granted, and kind of lose it in that way.
Wow.
Would you say that this is a kind of a spiritual technique as well? Is that pushing it too much, or?
Well, if we think of humans as having spirits, and this enhances the human spirit, then I would say yes.
Yeah. Yeah, too. Right. Well, this has been a really neat podcast. Thank you so much, both of you. I'm looking forward to picking your brain a little bit more on examine the evidence, because I have a couple stories about it, but sometimes I have trouble. Some stories, some techniques become much more prominent on the front of my brain, and I wouldn't mind hearing now or on some other occasion some of your enthusiasm for examine the evidence, even as a technique to help people who are depressed or anxious. I don't know if you have any.
Yeah, let's do that another time.
Okay, another time. All right.
It's actually,
that could be a whole podcast on its.
Yeah,
that could be a whole podcast by itself.
Yeah, we could do a podcast on truth-based techniques if you'd like to come back and discuss that topic.
Always happy to. Lots of good things to practice and learn together. I feel delighted. Yeah, let us do this. I know it was kind of hokey and, like I said, just very non-scientific, but I hope we've inspired some willingness for people not just to notice delight, but to see if they can escalate it through their self-talk today. And maybe that spreads a little delightful energy.
We'll see what people say, and maybe we'll think of a cool thing that we could brainstorm also on getting a little, something along these lines for our app folks, because they might enjoy having it also and add to the armamentarium.
Awesome.
Armamentarium, what does that mean?
Never
Angela,
heard that word, but it sounds fancy and it's kind of a delightful word.
Yeah.
Angela, thank you so much for emailing David and me about this and facilitating this. And the experiment in the park must have been so fun for everyone. I'm so grateful that you shared it with us. Yeah,
and gratitude to all the 42 people who did it on their own and contributed as well to our learning.
Say hello to your wonderful husband for me. Say hello to your wonderful Daisy for me. I think about both of you often.
Yeah.
Okay, thank you.
Affection for all of you. Take care, everyone. Bye.
Thanks so much for having us. Bye-bye.
This has been another episode of the Feeling Good podcast. For more information, visit Dr. Burns' website at feelinggood.com, where you will find the show notes under the podcast page. You will also find archives of previous episodes and many resources for therapists and non-therapists. We welcome your comments and questions. If you want to support the show, please share the podcast with people who might benefit from it. You could also go to iTunes and leave a 5-star rating. I am your host, Rhonda Borowski, the director of the Feeling Great Therapy Center. We hope you enjoyed this episode. I invite you to join us next time for another episode of the Feeling Good podcast.